Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here. Happy Monday. Hope you had a wonderful weekend, regardless of how ridiculous the price action got. Saw a pretty significant sell-off from altcoins, Bitcoin, the whole 9 yards there. War is bad. That's the common theme here. But at this point, we're seeing a swift recovery. Things are looking on the up and up here, testing our descending trend, breaking through some local moving averages. So generally speaking, this is a favorable short-term correction, but we want to double check and make sure the volume sustains itself before we get too crazy ahead of ourselves. But yeah, looking okay for the moment, right? Feels weird to say when we were at 104,000 going into the weekend and we saw like 98K this weekend. Okay, so let's quickly talk about one thing first before we go into liquidation. It's important to recognize that we do have a CME gap here. Okay, so we did close on Friday at roughly 100, and I'm going to round up and say 104,000, 103.7, and then we came all the way down as low as obviously the 99,000 range here. But once more, since the market has opened yesterday, we're referring to CME futures, of course, we can see that we're coming back up here, we're rallying, but we have a little bit of a gap still left between 102.5 and 104K. This is kind of a good rough estimate round number for you. So that does increase the likelihood of the price at least coming up to 104,000, okay? All right, so we'll talk about that in a minute here, but from a liquidation standpoint, majority of all longs got pretty well hammered over the weekend. There are late longs here entering the market between 95 and 96,000, so we got a heavy concentration there. But those are like really late longs, likely low leverage. There's like that's far enough away to not be super concerned. Okay, I think closing over 100,000 is a good firm indication of where we're at, and at this point we're not in bad shape at all. So overall, even though that was a very unfortunate sell-off for a lot of people, it's par for the course considering what's going on. What's interesting here is we've still got a lot of shorts here in the market, which increases the odds that we're going to see a short squeeze here soon. In other words, too many people are shorting the market right now, and it makes perfect sense to short. Trust me, I totally agree with that. In fact, we see 104,000. I'll probably consider doing that if the CME gap gets filled. But between now and then, we want to recognize that there's good momentum, there's good volume. We may see a continuation higher here. All that being said, we can see 105,000 is that point of control, that open interest area here. That's the heaviest over the last 7 days. Now, if we look and zoom out, let's go ahead and take a look at the 1 month here, and we can kind of see that there's still a concentration above the price at, once again, 105, 106, and 110. So more specifically, 105 has that solid area of potential resistance. You can kind of see that reflected here on the charts. Okay, so let's take a quick look at the overall sentiment here. Let's go ahead and go with the 4-hour time frame and work our way up. So what we want to talk about here really quick is just straightforward, simple way to understand it here. The daily time frame. We had our previous fair value gap almost fully filled, so I think further downside is less likely. We're starting to work ourselves into somewhat of a pattern here. Now, the patterns are not 100% guaranteed, but obviously we continue to work our way down here. This is a bullish type of flag pattern. These generally break to the upside, okay? So we could see that, or perhaps one more leg down. But generally speaking here, these are positive signs in the overall sense. But you do got to recognize too, from a macro perspective, we're under some key levels. And once again, we see confluence here at 105K. So we got 2 moving averages and the point of control there. So we've had the most amount of volume and also moving averages hanging out the most at that 105K range. I'm rounding up a little bit, but 105, 104.5, right in that range, we'll see some solid resistance if the price ends up continuing to that level. Overall, though, we haven't broken bullish yet. We're still under 50 on the RSI. MACD's diverging, MACD's converging here, trying to, but that really doesn't tell us too much, honestly. I like to kind of urge caution using the MACD. A lot of folks, even though I do use it myself too, a lot of folks will use it too consistently and feel like it's like a really strong teller, because there's sometimes it works great, sometimes it works terribly. Okay, so when it comes to manipulation in the market the way it is right now, you want to be careful with that. Having said that, though, the 4-hour time frame does carry kind of the most weight to me with the MACD. So once it does converge and shift momentum, there's a good chance it continues, which we're starting to see that shift in momentum. Problem is we haven't broken through our local high of like 103K range, so we're still under some resistances, and we haven't broken through 50 in the RSI either. So my anticipation is that we might kind of go range bound sideways and then leg up again and likely reject out of that 105K area. So that I'm looking for, at this point, just loosely shooting from the hip, because we're not there yet. If things continue further higher, I think a short in the 104 to 105K range makes sense. However, between now and then, there could be a lot of changes and things that will adjust. In other words, if volume continues to remain pretty high, then we maybe don't want to consider shorting. It's once the volume starts to slow down, that's when you want to consider the shift in momentum, okay? But for right now, a lot of things still kind of point down the overall sense. Try not to get too ahead of yourself with this nice little, high volume pump on a Monday morning. That's kind of standard stuff, okay? What isn't standard is the market manipulation based on the war efforts. Those are things you really can't account for. So take that and hopefully that learns or educates you a little bit more and you learn something there, okay? So thank you all so much for being an awesome part of my life. Make sure you again, check out Bitunix, phenomenal exchange, link down below for them. And then obviously join us over on Twitter, Telegram, and Discord if you haven't yet already. I got some nice buy alerts. In fact, I don't know if you saw it, but we had some high volume over the weekend, significant unusual activity, which is standard par for the course stuff. Yep. Anyways, have a good rest of your day. Thanks again for your time. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.